Hello everyone. This position right here in front of you is from the last round of the Geneva FIDE chess tournament. In this position, with the white pieces is GM Levon Aronian, and with the black pieces it's GM Salem Selah. And here after move 30, um, it's black to move. Uh, Aronian has just played the move G3. It's black to move, and you can see here that white has pressure on the D pawn. In fact, is preparing to win the pawn. So Salah played Queen E3 check, going into this pure bishop and knight endgame. And I criticize this move because I feel that black basically just abandoned this pawn. And perhaps he felt maybe he can draw a pawn down, but I felt that it was unnecessary to go into that ending, and that better for black was to just maintain the queens on the board and just simply protect the pawn and let white earn his keep, basically. So after queen takes e3, d takes e3, Aronian played knight f4, improving his knight, and he's just planning on rounding up this pawn here. Right? Ideas like this come to mind: king here, king there, and just rounding up the pawn. h5, king f1, bishop h6, knight comes to d3, king e6, and the knight is just on a world tour. King d7. Salah doesn't want to give up squares by playing move like that. This ties the black king up back here though. So now king e2, a5. This is the type of move that white wants, because it not only brings the pawns closer to white for future consumption, but it drives the piece to a square where it would like to go. So basically, Aronian has the black pieces helping him out to do his work. These are one of those high-level chess moves. I love this move right here because it does a lot in the position. Knight b4, yes, at its surface it just attacks a pawn, but it's such a monkey wrench in the black position here. I already showed you how c5 would be anti-positional because the knight would just hop in. The knight would just hop in this square, just be dominant. The bishop, the bishop can't get it out. So that means black has to tie his king up, and we all know we need the king in the endgame, right? So the king is tied up to the defense of the pawn, and then the only other way to remedy this situation is to weaken self even further by advancing this isolated pawn up the board. And then, if possible, if the king was allowed to, if this bishop was allowed to, say come here and attack the knight, this pawn will be left all alone. So this move does a lot for white's position. So a5, knight e2, and this pawn just drops. Check, and he doesn't even take it right away. He could have took it. He doesn't even bother. Check. King d7, and now f4. Bishop's cut off. King takes e3, and now with the extra pawn, Aronian welcomes the king and pawn endgame. d5, C takes d5, C takes d5, and we see the terrible state of the pawns. We have a blockaded d pawn, 3 to 2 over here, extra pawn on that side, extra pawn on the other side of the board. So even though technically white is only up 1 pawn, it really looks like he's up 2 pawns because he has a 2 to 1 majority on the queen side and a 3 to 2 on the king side. H3, just creating the passed pawn on the queen side, using the standard formula of moving the pawns in a flanks formation. I made a video on using the pawns, as a flanks several months ago, but that's the standard procedure. Is basically you're trying to line all the pawns up. So if you had the C pawn here, just like in the game here, you have this structure. You're trying to basically get all the pawns to the same rank and then move them all again. Of course, there's other pawns here that can, make captures and things like that. But that's the basic idea of the flanks, is you're trying to move your formation to where they're all next to each other. Like you don't want to have, say, this pawn up here and the other 2 pawns back here. You want them all moving one after the other. So H3, and then of course the next move will be G3, and so on. Excuse me, G3 and then G4. Okay, Bishop F6. There it is, G4. And of course, in an ideal world, white would like to have all 3 of these pawns on the the 4th rank. However, we can see that black can just capture, so that can't happen. H takes G4, H takes D4. So now the capture's been made, but notice how the 2 pawns are on the 4th rank together. G5, and of course, there's the passed pawn that's created. Bishop takes, F takes G5 is possible also, but then there's just this blockade immediately on the pawn. White is still just fine there. Aronian just chose to create the passed pawn right away here. King D6, Knight E6. Again, a dual purpose move again. F5, not only just creating the passer, but then an outpost whereby the knight is unassailable on E6. King D4, check. King D3. And fortunately for white is he has another majority on the queen side of the board. So that's great, having all of these benefits in the position. Shuffling going on by Salem. And here we go. The flanks formation is lining up the pawns right next to, adjacent to each other. King C5 to stop the creation of the majority here. Check. King B5. And now we see some maneuvering of the knight, and the idea is to remove the blockade from the F pawn. Bishop E7, and at the same time attacking this pawn here. Aronian rightfully ignores that pawn because this threat is more dangerous than allowing this pawn to be captured. Okay, so the A pawn is traded for the G pawn, but now you have 2 passers. King B4, Knight E6, King takes B3, and now the pawn is running toward promotion. G5, G6, A3, and there's nothing for white to worry about, as this knight right here will cover both squares, and Salem resigned at this point. So there's nothing that can be done here. For instance, if a2, then simply just g7. The bishop would have to sacrifice itself, as well as the knight. So let's say a1, queen, knight takes, and then the game could very well end in that fashion. So I just want to go back now, because to the critical point where I felt it was a critical point anyway, instead of going into such a bad ending, because like I said, that queen trade was just tantamount to giving that pawn away as far as I was concerned. Instead of the move that was played in the game, queen e3 here, there's a couple of moves that protect the pawn but preserve the keep the queens on the board. One is queen g5. Okay, just with a couple of tricks. Notice that this diagonal is open, so of course not. I'm sorry. Of course not. Queen takes the d4 because of bishop. But if knight takes d4, and you have queen c5, which would be winning for black because of this pin here. So the pawn is not able to be captured by white. So perhaps maybe he would have to do a move like king f2, just like a waiting move. But at this point, black can afford to just shuffle around. Queen f6, and let's say a3. Let's see. Perhaps a move like queen e5. Again, it's now black would have to be careful. Moves like b4 and trying to create this majority. A passed pawn on the queen side. But again, it's with the queens on the board, it's much more dangerous for white to try to pursue any type of activity, because there's always chances of some type of perpetual check or just dropping material. It's very dangerous in the queen endings. So here, yes, black is a little bit worse because of the bad pawn structure. His pawn structure is not that bad, but yes, he has this isolated pawn on a d file. And again, as we showed before, you don't want to play a move like c5 here if you're black, because the knight will soon hop into f4 and go right into e5 and be unassailable. But I just wanted to give some ideas of alternatives that were probably better than the game continuation here. Instead of queen g5, which I think is probably the best move, maybe queen e5 straight away works also. And again, with the same type of ideas. Again, if like I move like knight f4, queen g5. If you don't want to give up the f file. Because you got to protect this pawn. Maybe just queen f6 here. But the point is real clear and simple, is that keeping the queens on the board was a better option in this case for black. So that is it for this video. The tournament, the Geneva tournament, is also over. I think I'm going to look at one more game from this round. And again, as I always say, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.